Well, you mentioned the video. Well, I mentioned the videos too, but that was something we explored when Rodney was on the podcast. How did you
Yes.
get into that stuff? Was it through wrestling?
We were very much into wrestling. I was not a wrestling fan my whole life, but at that point, I was a wrestling fan, and we were using the video games for Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. He brought out the video camera having seen an episode of Ghost Rider where they made a music video. And I remember us messing around with the camera there, and then I suggested, hey, maybe we could use the camera and do like little intro segments into our video game matches we were recording. And we did that for a while, and then I believe on the podcast he explained when he went and saw the Alfred Hitchcock thing in Florida, it sent him into overdrive, and then I immediately followed, and I saw the direction we could go. Instead of just, talking in front of the camera, we could actually start some maybe narrative stories.
Making your own storylines, playing them out on the Genesis?
Yeah. So pretending it was like the actual WWF but using, the video games to tell the stories. So then I thought, well, let's start showing ourselves and like the commentators, like Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan standing there. So we'll be standing there talking. I kept trying to get him to get that camera out, and we would do that. But that's the only thing I saw it for.
Well, you kind of had to make your own storylines because this wasn't like the modern wrestling video games where there's storyline mode and stuff. It was just mash the buttons as fast as you could.
Right. Then making little posters and stuff and cutting up his magazines to shreds to make little posters and hang them up.
Oh my God. I would cut up my WWF magazines to make collages and stuff. And that just kills me now with all those magazines in storage, with thinking like, how much would they be worth if half of this page wasn't missing? And I know exactly where that picture is, too.
Forget
Damn it.
That page, too. You would look through our magazines, and they were like just Swiss cheese. You would just see the light through every page.
Well, you had to save the rest of it, so you were very precise with the pictures you had to cut out.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The articles are intact. That was my whole push to use the camera. But I never thought about, movie making or anything. I think it was a combination of that music video from Ghost Rider, him doing Alfred Hitchcock Presents thing down in Universal Studios, and I remember an episode of the cartoon Doug on Nickelodeon where they made a little movie, and those kind of things all were like, let's do this. And then we tried.
Wasn't that Rodney's favorite show back then too, Doug?
Yes, mine too. That was great.
Well, you mentioned the video games, and your brother worked at a GameStop. You've got an emulator still. And we used to play games a lot. So when did you start playing video games? Was that something early on, continued through your whole life, off and on?
We got a Nintendo, well, it must have been like 1989, I believe. And then eventually Sega and Super Nintendo were the gaming system, but I was never that big into it. I only ever had like 5 or 6 games per system, except for Nintendo. Everybody had bookshelves worth of them. I did have a Sega Saturn, and I liked like the Alien trilogy and stuff. I could play the first-person shooter type things like that. That basically Alien trilogy for Saturn was like Doom for the PC. It was just walk and shoot.
Christopher Walken.
Yeah, walk and shoot.
Pow.
But I think my brothers, they kept buying more and more and more systems. They would have everything. So I would get samples of these games, and they bought a PS1 like you do, and I remember Power Move Pro Wrestling was awesome. GameCube finally came out, and I remember F-Zero I thought was kind of cool. Then Resident Evil 4 came out, and which is why to this day, right now, in my TV cabinet is a GameCube, and there is only one game in the house for it, and it's Resident Evil 4 sitting next to it. That's it, and I keep it there because of that. And that was my all-time favorite game.
How did you get into pro wrestling?
So this was, like I said, 91. We'd go over Rodney's house, mainly on weekends. Rodney was a massive wrestling fan by this point. I had no clue about anything with wrestling. I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of it. I thought of stereotypes type stuff, big goofy guys, and I didn't really care. And I did think it was real at that point too, but it just didn't have any appeal to me. Then I remember he had on WWF Superstars, and I believe there was a match with the Headshrinkers versus 2 nobodies, 2 jobbers or something, and it was interesting. Is the best way to put it. Like the Headshrinkers kind of their finish move with them standing there and the headbutt off top rope. I was like, that's kind of neat. And Rodney was well into the stuff. But it was when I saw, and I still think it was a Superstars or a Sunday Morning Challenge, something like that. The Undertaker, I think, fought Bam Bam Bigelow. Well, that was it. I was hooked. The Undertaker character blew my mind.
Was it just the theatrics of it?
Yes. From the entrance of the lights going out in an arena to him raising his hands and turning the lights back on, and to him having this superhuman strength that he would keep sitting up in the ring. I was never really into superheroes and comic book stuff, but that right there, I guess, would have been it for me. That was my superhero comic book right there. That was so cool to me. I started getting into it. By WrestleMania 10, I was addicted. I know the Bret Hart-Owen Hart storyline caught me completely.
Which was great.
I was so into that. The Survivor Series match with Ray Combs, just to build up to that, and the way it was going to come about in WrestleMania by WrestleMania 10, and that probably was it, that storyline.
What was great about that storyline was a lot of the best heels are the ones that you feel their actions could be justified.
Right.
And in that case, it was done in such a way that Owen's jealousy could be justified.
Yeah, and you could actually see some people root for Owen. I mean, yes, he was playing the top heel or that heel in that situation, but you could see some people sympathize with that storyline who maybe had a big brother taking the spotlight kind of thing. It was great.
I never had a bigger brother, but I totally was Owen all the way.
I was too much of a mark at that point, so I knew I had to be with the Hitman. But boy, did I love it. I loved all of that. It was so great. Still remember that one interview he gave before WrestleMania where Bret Hart said, "I'll give him a fight. I'll give him a damn good fight." Yeah. I remember that so well.
Well, the Wrestling Connection is going to lead up to how we met the first time. Do you remember those circumstances?